Welcome back again, and thank you for joining me for Chapter 8 of the Skylark song by J.M. Frey. For the first time since her commissioning, Robin eschewed the officers' mess for breakfast and made her way straight to the common canteen. She didn't want to ruin her morning with another match with Renge and her cronies, especially since she was trying so hard to regain the calm confidence she'd had before Al had gone and ruined it all. The mess hall was just stirring, the staff wheeling out jangling carts of plates, cups, tarnished knives and forks, filling the air with the jingle of metallic music. Robin filled her plate as the cooks put out the first of the giant dented serving tureens. Then she poured herself some tea, added a daub of honey, and went to their favorite table. A few minutes later, Al came in, fetched his own breakfast, and sat down beside her. But he didn't say anything. What was there to say? Nothing that would improve either of their moods, that was for sure. Nothing that couldn't wait until after. Robin ate, but tasted nothing. The food was fuel to keep her going in the air, or else she wouldn't have bothered. She wasn't hungry. They remained locked in tense silence as they broke their fasts, and slowly the hall around them filled. Robin half anticipated being disturbed by people asking to see the love letter. She was dreading it. She didn't need the distraction of hundreds of people wishing them luck when they needed to focus. Luckily, the base seemed sluggish and reluctant to start cranking this morning. Even with the sun up, it was cold, and they were more concerned with shuffling in from the winter-breathed air outside, heading straight for the warm porridge, than they were with hounding the captain in their midst. "I'm not sorry for trying to kiss you," Al said, as soon as the noise had risen to its familiar pitch and was loud enough to drown out intimate conversation. He looked ahead, not meeting her eyes. "I might try to again after all of this is over, if that's all right with you. With warning next time, of course." "Al," Robin began, loud enough so only he could hear. She stopped there, however. She didn't know what she could add that didn't sound like an apology, or an excuse, or pity. "No, it's okay," Al said. He stood and gathered up their collective dishes. "I get it. I'm good enough to be your mid-flight, and nothing else." "That's not fair," Robin whispered. "No, it's not," he agreed. "But they're your rules, not mine." "Al, I'm going to drop these off," he said, nodding at the dishes, "and then you and I are going to go finish what we started with the navigation systems, yeah? And we won't talk about this again until after." "Fine," Robin said, nodding. She felt awful. She knew that she was taking advantage of the friendship between them by not setting Al straight immediately, but she also knew that she couldn't afford to compromise their ability to focus as a team any further than it had already been strained. Not now. Not today. Especially today. Guilt and worry churned in her guts as she watched Al make his way over to the busing station and leave their dishes in the giant wash basin. Before he had turned around to come back, Robin had schooled her nerves and her expression. When they returned from this ridiculous dance, when this was all over and the Coyote was dead, Robin would have a talk with Al. She would figure out how she felt and what she wanted to do about it. Until then, there was only one man she could think about. When they got back outside, Robin sat on the ground as Al began the pre-flight check, handing him the tools he needed before he even asked for them. He said as she passed over the key used to tighten the winch system. "Guess that's the good thing about having a pilot who was once a mid-flight. Care to pass me the grease pat, too, Captain Arianhod?" "Har har," Robin said, but did as he asked, pinching the edge of the paper packet carefully to keep her leather gloves clean. She supposed she could have done it barehanded, but her fingers were cold, and she would have to strip off her gloves to fly soon enough. When Al was satisfied that the steering system was in order and that all the flaps were moving smoothly, they pushed the glider into queue for loading on the aircraft carrier Zeppelin. Al glanced at his pocket watch. 9:20, he said. Just enough time for a visit to the water closet. I'm good, Robin said, eyes on the sky. She studied the clouds, trying to gauge how fast the wind was up there, and how clear it might be above them. She wondered whether it would be smarter to stay in the cloud bank and drop down on the Coyote from above, or whether she should try to sneak up underneath the cover if she thought he was going to try for the same. Al grunted, and suddenly there were warm hands reaching down Robin's shirt. What? Hey! She said, and slapped his wrists. Al laughed and yanked his hands back, one of them clutching the love letter. I haven't actually read it yet, you know. You could have just asked, Robin said. Yeah, he said, taking a step back as Robin reached out to snatch the letter back. She lunged again, and he held it above his head, dancing out of the way and laughing as she leapt for it. But then I wouldn't have been able to cop a more glorious feel than any woodland god before me. Robin laughed too. This felt right. This is what she and Al were to each other. This is what they were supposed to be. This was good. You're a dirty, running, uncouth, another voice cut in, and Robin stopped dead, spinning on her heel to stare at the interlopers. Captain Renge and a handful of other pilots were making their way past the queue of gliders, heading towards them. And to think, I was the one reprimanded for behavior unfitting an officer. Omens, Al grunted and dropped his hands to his sides, swiftly hiding the love letter in his coverall pocket. Renge stopped a good few feet away from Robin, probably to make sure she stayed out of punching range, and grinned. Robin felt the confident calm she had been cultivating all morning start to blister. Captain, Robin said, nodding stiffly, to what do I owe the displeasure? Renge jerked her chin at a tall man standing just off to the side. Wade! He was leaning on a pretty nurse, his blonde hair unbrushed, weary circles under his eyes, but his smile was bright. His armless shoulder was bound tightly, and without all the bulky protective padding, Robin could see that the medics had removed his limb as close to the torso as possible. Wade! Robin said, and happily shook the hand he shakily offered. They're letting you up and around. Captain Arianhod, he said. Never thought I'd live to see the day a Sealy wore the wings. He tapped one of the rank pins at her collar. His voice was careful, neutral, but the smile and sparkle in his eyes were genuine. It was a relief. You look good, Robin said, and then realized that it might have been insulting to say that. I mean, despite the... No, not despite. I mean that... I'm so sorry, Wade. I should have done better. I should have come back faster. I shouldn't have... Wade sent her a soft, slightly miserable grin. You saved my life. You brought me home. You have nothing to apologize for. Robin reached out, and when he didn't flinch away, she laid a gentle hand on his bandages. Maybe a little? Nothing, he insisted. It looked like he was planning to say more, but was interrupted when Renge called out, Oh, dear Wade, what have they done to your glider? Hey, get away from there! Al snarled, stalking over to shoo Renge and one of her cronies back. They'd lifted the nose flap and were poking at the painted Robin. Hardly a terrifying specter, Renge sneered. Robin bristled. Makes the enemy turn tail fast enough, or maybe it's the fact that I'm good at flying and, tend to shoot them down a lot. You arrogant, smug, dirty little tick, Renge started, stalking around the glider to stand toe-to-toe with Robin. I'm going to... Going to what, Captain Renge? Wade asked, shuffling over to stand behind Robin's shoulder. He placed his hand on her arm meaningfully. Renge's mouth puckered. She swallowed hard, and then said, Wish you good luck, Captain Arianhod. May the All-Mother protect you against the Coyote. Thank you, Robin said graciously. Her among many. Renge turned on her heel and stalked off across the runway, heading back towards the officers' quarters. 2 others followed close in her wake. The remaining pilots each took a turn shaking her hand and wished her the protection of the All-Mother before they left. Al made faces at their backs. Wade, the last of them, pulled her into a gentle, one-armed hug and whispered into her hair, Give that coal bag payback for my arm. May the gods of luck be sitting on your shoulder. Robin smiled up at him as he pulled away. and may the All-Mother grant you a speedy recovery, Captain Perwink." "Send him to hell, Captain Arianhod." He snapped off a wrong-handed salute, and then, leaning on the nurse, he tottered back towards the infirmary. "Send him to hell, Captain Arianhod," Al echoed in a high, mocking, pinched Bene accent as soon as Wade was out of earshot. Robin swatted his stomach. He gave her a grimace and continued in his regular voice. "What was that supposed to be? Your scrubbed-up Bene pilot come to wish you luck? Where was he when Renge was torturing you, huh?" Robin narrowed her eyes at Al. "In the hospital, recovering from a terrible loss of actual limb that he suffered while saving my life. You're out of line, Sergeant Bridget." "Excuse me? When did we resort to line of command crap, Robin?" "As soon as we needed to." "You mean as soon as you became a scrubbed-up snob like them?" Robin rocked back on her heels. I am not." Al turned red and looked away. His ears flushed and he bit his lower lip. "Oh, God, you really are jealous. There's nothing to be jealous of. I told you that." "And I didn't believe the rumors." "I didn't," Al muttered, but then the way he just hugged you." "Oh, for God's sake," Robin said, throwing up her hands. "There can't be a bond between a mid-flight and her captain after they've survived so many battles. He's not allowed to be my friend just because he's Bene?" "He's not your friend," Al snapped, turning back to face her. His expression was hard, angrier than Robin had ever seen it before. His sudden rage caught her flat-footed. "He's a pilot, and the minute he leaves this base, you know that he'll forget you ever existed. He'll marry that rutting nurse or someone, and it won't matter one bit that he's got no arm, 'cause he has money. You ain't nothing and no one to him." It felt like a slap in the face, but Robin wasn't going to show it. Instead, she crossed her arms and scowled. "So, now I'm nothing to Wade. A second ago, Gossip said I was his lover." "It can be both, Robin," Al said. "Sealies are nothing to them. You can be faceless and still just be an obedient little girl who lays back and..." Robin lashed out, but he caught her wrist before the back of her hand could connect his face. She could, however, scream at him. "Stop it, Al! Just shut up!" she shouted, yanking her wrist free and turning her back to him. "Robin, don't talk about him! Don't talk about me that way!" "Sealies live to do as they're told," Al recited grimly. "You wouldn't be the first." Robin scrubbed her eyes with the heels of her hands. She took a few deep breaths, struggling to regain the detached calm she had enjoyed in the early morning stillness of her parents' home. "Go secure the glider's nose flap, Sergeant Bridget," she ground out, turning to face him with her head held high. Al stared at her with stunned surprise, mouth working like a landed fish. "That's an order, Sergeant," she snapped. "The Coyote's waiting for us." "Aye, ma'am," Al spat back, bitterness in every syllable. He offered a mocking salute and then firmly turned his back to her, marching off to see to the glider. Robin walked over to the Zeppelin gangway and slumped against the railing, weary and cold. "I hate this godforsaken war." The gliders were loaded and lined up in order of release. Robin's glider was the first on, as it would be the last off. She'd requested that the Zeppelin take her to a higher release altitude than the others. As the ground crew began the slow process of spooling the Zeppelin out, Robin climbed into her cockpit and settled herself behind the dash. Al hopped in and helped the carrier's crew secure the buckles on the glider's entry flaps. He was frustratingly mute, seething quietly, making it quite clear that he would punish Robin for pulling rank on him for as long as it took her to break down and apologize. That, Robin decided, is never going to happen. I'm not going to be the one to say sorry first. The Zeppelin rose on its tether. The grinding whine of the mechanical winch on the far side of the carrier bay jammed at Robin's ears, high-pitched and as reassuringly familiar as the scent of honeyed tea in the canteen. The bottom of Robin's stomach dropped out as they ascended, and she closed her eyes, reveling in the momentary feeling of weightlessness. Al threw himself down into his seat, back to back with Robin. If he'd ever felt the same sense of wonder at the sensation of floating up into the air, he'd never said. As soon as they had stopped at the first altitude mark and the carrier crew hitched the first glider's front wheel into the slingshot track, Al leaned over the backs of their seats to speak directly in her ear. "You never told me he already knows who you are," Al accused, shaking the love letter at her. It wasn't an apology, so Robin didn't mind answering. "I didn't know, not for sure." "Didn't know, or just decided that it wasn't any of my business?" Robin craned around in her seat. "Don't be an ass." "I'm not being an ass. You're being a complete ass." Al scowled, dark eyebrows pulled down over black eyes. "Fine. I'm being an ass. I'm the king of the asses. I'm sorry." Robin sighed. "Then I'm sorry too," she admitted. "I don't want to fight with you, especially not right now." The angle hurt her neck, so she turned back around and strapped herself in. Ahead of them, the launch door opened, and the first of the gliders shot out into the air. "Why do you think he sent the letter to you, Robin? Why hasn't he shot us down yet, if he remembers you?" A chill crept up her spine, and she remembered the way his gaze seemed to call to her. She stripped off her gloves and jammed them into her belt, then rubbed her arms to try to stave off the goosebumps. "No idea. It creeps me out, though." The last glider before Robin's was loaded onto the slingshot, and the launch doors closed up after it disappeared into the clouds. Al dropped back down into his seat, and Robin heard him clipping himself into his harness. The Zeppelin crew's flagman flashed the prepare signal, and she returned it with a thumbs up. The ground crew pulled her glider into position, and the winch squealed as they ascended to the altitude Robin had requested. A few minutes later, and with another signal from the flagman, the glider's front wheel was hitched into the slingshot track. "Ready mid-flight?" Robin asked. "Ready, Captain," Al confirmed. "Let's go." The launch doors opened up again. Robin pushed her goggles down over her eyes, and the world turned amber. She flashed a double thumbs up. The flagman snapped his hand downward, and with no more warning than that, the glider shot forward and soared out into the sky. Robin whooped in glee, every nerve in her face and fingers tingling. "Gods, I love that part," she crowed. "Ugh, I don't," Al groaned. "I think I left my brekkie back there." Robin circled the glider around, doing a mandatory sweep for any arrow ships that might try to attack the carrier, and saw none. The Zeppelin was already descending, the steel cables and winches pulling it back groundward as it bobbed in the swift currents of the wind. Robin turned the nose of her glider south. She let out a deep breath and closed her eyes for a second, centering herself with reassuring thoughts. She wasn't scared. She wasn't worried. She was a great pilot. She'd made every other aeroship she'd faced turn tail or turn into wreckage. The Coyote was just one man, and she could beat him. Robin wasn't stupid enough to fly directly to the meeting location, so she circled at the front for a bit, avoiding other altercations and ensuring that nobody was trying to sneak up on her. After an hour, they crossed into enemy territory. 12 minutes, she informed Al, remembering the sound of Wade's voice as he'd announced the same thing to her all those months ago. Just as they were approaching the bloody fingerprint on the map, a soft metallic click caught her ears, and she opened her eyes. A faint ticking followed, and then another snick. "Noon," Al said, putting away his pocket watch. They traveled on in silence. Robin counted backwards from 100, eyes scanning the cloud bank below for any telltale shadows. The glider gave a weird little shiver, and Robin pushed gently at the yoke, gaining a bit more altitude to avoid whatever turbulence had caused it. Robin thought she might have heard a splintering sound, but couldn't be sure. It was drowned out by the metallic click of Al removing his safety harness. "No. You know what? I'm not through," Al said, as if picking up a conversation that they had dropped. A second later, he was hovering over her shoulder, one square hand a warm, tingling presence at the back of her neck. There's one more thing I want to say before he shows up. What? Robin asked, staring up at him in confused shock. What are you even talking about? Kissing you. No, you idiot. Shut up and let me fly, Al. He heaved a theatrical sigh. Robin. Al, the Coyote is looking for us right now. For me. Can't we just talk about this seriously for half a moment? What's there to talk about? Oh, so it was nothing. Al, I'm trying to focus right now, please. But fine, okay? We'll talk about it when we get back on the ground, but not right now. I need to stay. Before Robin could finish her thought, the crackle of splintering wood sounded again, and this time she was sure it was real. Did you hear that? Woman's, I actually did, Al said grimly. I'm gonna get my toolbox. Hold on. He moved out of her line of vision. Robin heard the hatch in the floor clunk open, and the cabin was suddenly filled with the loud white noise of wind. Put your safety harness on first before you stick your head out there, you idiot! Robin called. What? Listen, I think we should turn around. If something's wrong... Nothing's wrong. We just checked it together. Just keep your eyes out for... Al? Holy... Reading omens. Robin, look up. He's here. Dive! Dive! Robin shoved the yoke forward and Al tumbled past her, slamming against the dash. Get your safety harness back on, you running ass! She snarled, and twisted the glider to the left, banking steeply and sweeping against the upper canopy of the forest. Al scrambled towards a seat, hauling himself hand over hand by the rungs welded to the floor. Behind her, the buzzing rumble of an aeroship grew louder. The Coyote's aeroship was still quieter than it should have been, but Robin was getting good at picking out the fainter hum of her nemesis. He was hot on their tail. Robin twisted around in her seat to try to sight him through the side windscreens, but he was too close to see. The sharp cough of a gun rang through the cabin, and the glider shivered. Al! Left wing, he snarled. Forget the repairs. Get the gun! Robin called. She jerked hard to the right, hoping the damage to the wing's canvas wasn't so severe that it would impede the maneuver, but the glider didn't respond. She tried to bank again, yanking hard enough that the handles cut into her palm, slicing through her calluses. The yoke trembled, and the glider made an embarrassing attempt at a turn, sliding sideways with no real control. What the hell is wrong with this thing? Robin snarled. Robin, he's under us! Al shouted from the rear of the glider. Their own gun answered the Coyotes, and Robin yanked to the left again. The glider responded this time, turning sharply and dancing higher on the updraft, allowing Robin the advantage of getting behind the Coyote. The painted wolf snarled at her from around the exhaust pipes, and Al swung the gun hanging beneath the glider around, aiming for the beast's yellow eyes. A few bullets pinged off the metallic exterior of the aeroship, and the Coyote veered away. Follow him! Al snarled. Robin shoved at the yoke. Nothing responded. I can't, Robin cried. There's something wrong with the steering. No, I checked it myself, Al shouted, his voice getting closer as he hauled himself up the cabin and came around beside her, jamming his bulky frame under the dash so he could get a look at the steering column. I know it was fine when we queued up. No one else was near... Oh, hells! Did Wrench? You didn't check? I checked, I swear I did! Al yelled over the roar of the Coyote's aeroship coming back around. Robin felt her stomach drop away again, but this time it wasn't because of an altitude change. What has that crazy cow done? Robin snarled. She hauled hard on the yoke, and the glider pulled up just enough that they buzzed over the head of the Coyote. His guns flared again, and the sound of ripping canvas echoed through the cockpit. The glider tipped to the left, dropping horribly. A glance to the side told Robin why. Half the wing had come clean off. It was enough to get them to the ground with, but nothing she could use to maneuver. Wrench is gonna get us killed! I think that's the point, Al said, hauling himself upright. Then he pointed over her shoulder at the windscreen. He's coming back around. He's gonna drive us too low to catch an updraft. Not if I can help it, Robin snarled and yanked back hard on the yoke. The glider wobbled midair. Robin yanked harder, and with an inglorious crack, the whole thing fell apart in her hands. The handles came off, and she looked down. Blue sky peered back at her through a hole in the floor as the steering column fell to the earth in pieces. Trees shivered where they landed. Oh, Running hells, Robin breathed. The glider sank, its weight pulling them towards the tree line in a grotesque parody of elegance.
Give up when you're down.